Moses' seat. And he said, the law that they teach you is correct. He said, observe those things, but don't do as they do, for they teach it, but they don't do it. The law was primarily designed as a constitution for the nation of Israel to teach them how to live together in harmony and peace. The law has two basic things. It teaches them how to be in right relationship with God and how to be in right relationship with each other. And so when we look at the law, which we call the Ten Commandments, the Levitical law, God is teaching Israel how to become a nation and how to operate as a nation. He does those things that they may have life and that they may have them more abundantly. When we, the church, begin to make disciples, sometimes we have to not see everything from what we quote unquote call spirituality. It deals with the holistic individual, deal with the wholeness of an individual's life. And so when we are teaching the way of the kingdom way is designed for individuals, just as it was in those days, to be in right relationship with God and right relationship with each other. And that's why Jesus comes along and said the greatest two commandments, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy mind, and with all thy strength. And the second is like unto it, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. If we do these two things, it will cover all the other laws, because the rest of the laws and the teaching of the prophet is built on those two things, love of God and love of neighbor. And so what the Pharisees did, they taught the scriptures, but they did not by example, did not by precept, did not show the love that they should have had for their neighbor. It is ironic that in America, we are called the bastion of Christianity, and we seem to have the same problem as the Pharisees did. We talk about God, we talk about Christianity, we talk about the kingdom of God, but we have problems extending the love that God talked about to humanity. And so, and he tells them here that the Pharisees are hypocrites. And if we're not careful, we will wind up in that same vein as hypocrites because of our lack of love for humanity, love for each other, love for neighbor, and our desire, as we say in America, to be free, to do as we want. Well, your freedom stops when it encroaches upon somebody else's health and it encroaches upon somebody else's well-being. And then as the people of God, our desire is supposed to be that my neighbor has all the rights that I have, making sure that my neighbor have the opportunity to have life and have it more abundantly just as I do. And so we're going to discuss Matthew 23, and I just read for you verse 1 and 2. And so I'm going to go to verse 3 now. Therefore, whatever they tell you to observe, observe it. But do not do according to their works. For they say and do not do what they do. And that's what we call a hypocrite. A hypocrite is a person that tell you that they're doing something and try to demand that you do it, but they don't even do it themselves. And so that's what the Pharisees were. They were hypocrites. And hear what he says, verse 4, for they bind heavy burdens, hard to bear, and lay them on men's shoulders, but they themselves will not move. One of the things that God convicts the Pharisees about most is that they would put burdens on particularly the poor. People were already suffering, but they kept helping the rich in their work instead of helping those who were suffering and helping their neighbors who were striving to live a life that was abundant, but because of systems could not live an abundant life. Systems of the Roman Empire where they were taxed, system by the church where they were overtaxed by the church, system by the Jewish king. And so there were so many systems that their families could not make a livable wage. They had to sell their children into indentured servitude, and the people struggled. That's why there were so many sick among them. One of the things that poverty brings about is sickness and disease and mental health issues, because people are trying to survive instead of living. God did not create us to be survivors. God created us that we may have life and have it more abundantly, because God is a God of more than enough. He gives enough for all of us to be able to live life abundantly. The problem is that just as the Pharisees, we don't love neighbors ourselves. And so we've created corrupt systems that allow people to amass great wealth, not by proper gain, but by gaming the system. And by gaming the system, they're able to get wealth. And as the more and more they get wealth, the more they game the system. And they basically buy those who are in position of authority. And that's what we see happening in America when we see that percent of the population own over half of the wealth of the whole country. That does not happen because people are smart businessmen. That happens because you have corrupt systems. And those systems, God commands us to speak out against, because they deal with what we call injustice. And so the Pharisees, they were tied in with the Roman government, and they were the wealthiest of the nation of Israel, and they helped the Roman government keep oppressed the rest of their brethren, the Jews. And this was explicitly against God's commandment of love thy neighbor as thyself.
How long did it last? With the Pharisees were over in the age?
How long did it last? How long did they? It lasts almost 200-300 years after generation after generation. Yes, because what was happening, Rome was the empire at that time, and as the empire, they had occupied the class citizens as Rome had extended its empire across the globe. But the Jewish leaders, the church leaders, the Pharisees and others, they made agreement with Rome. Basically, if you allow us to have our wealth and we live well, then we will allow you to do whatever you want to do to the rest of the people. And that happened generation after generation. That's what Jesus comes in to break up. When Jesus comes into Jerusalem, he's leaving a poor people movement. That's why he said in Luke, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he's anointed me to preach the good news to the poor. And that's what Jesus actually leads, as a poor people movement. That's why you see all the healing of the sick. That's why you see feeding of the multitude, all those things, as Jesus is leading a poor people movement, and he's beginning to turn it around. When Jesus comes into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, he's coming in as king, and he's also coming in as an insurrectionist. He's coming in to establish the kingdom of God, and the kingdom of God, which will overshadow the powers of Rome and Israel. But what happened, the same people, the Pharisees, the high priests, and all those, they said, instead of breaking up what we got, we're going to get rid of Jesus. So these things that we see now has happened before, and if we're not careful, what we will allow is, what will happen is that religious people will tie into corrupt government and use that to oppress the rest of the people. And that's what happened in the Jewish time that Jesus was living. So it was generation after generation after generation. So Jesus came to break it up. And as people of God, we should be trying to break up the same thing. And so liberation theologians said Jesus is on the side of the poor. He's on the side of the oppressed. Questions? Okay, we're in Matthew 23. I think we just finished verse 6. Okay, so do we have a scribe going to read for us now?
Where we at?
Matthew chapter 23, verse 5.
Somebody read? Mm-hmm. Okay, but all their works they do for to be seen of men.
Okay, hold up right there. Is this a problem in the church in the day of now time? People do stuff in the church to be seen by men.
Yeah.
For accolades.
For accolades. It's a real problem.
Yeah.
But people do that anyway, because like, even on social media, you see, oh, I'm giving to the poor, and they posted it to get all the likes. So you see that even now.
Yeah. Now, so we got to remember when we say in the church, we're not talking about just in the sanctuary.
Right.
Because word church means it is the people of God. So we see that among the people of God, they do a whole lot of things just be seen of men. Yeah. As a matter of fact, sometimes the Lord tell you, don't let your right hand know what your left hand is doing. What he basically said by that, if you're going to do something, just do it. You ain't got to tell everybody you're doing it. He said, if the reason why you're doing it is so that you can get accolades here, he said, profit you nothing because you won't get rewards in heaven for that. And so what we're supposed to do is, because we're doing what is just and what's right for the kingdom of God, and we're doing what's just and right to help people. Okay? And we are servants. And that's the part we forget. We are servants of the Most High God. And a servant do as the master instruct. That's why we call Jesus Lord, because he is what? He's over us. He's our authority. He's the Most High, and we're supposed to do as he instructs us to do in our service. So we are servants. We are servants of God. And a servant, that's what they do. They do what? They serve. But we got too many people who've exalted themselves in a position of lordship. And that's some of the same thing that the Pharisees are doing. And if you're a true servant, you don't quit because you don't have a title.
That's right.
Okay? True servants don't seek titles, they seek to do the work.
Do you think when Jesus performed all those miracles and people saw it, that he kind of liked it? Like,
Did he kind
that
of...
people are seeing what I'm, is that...
No.
Like, it was proud and stuff.
Did he feel some type of way?
Right.
No, because you got to understand where Jesus came from. Jesus came from sitting at the right hand of the throne in heaven, where in heaven he had angels bowing before him. He had all the glory of God before him, because heaven has more than just God the Father, God the Son. Heaven has angels. It has people. And Isaiah talked about how they worship. So there he's at the throne of God. And Paul said when he went in the third heaven, he saw a place like he'd never seen before. Eyes had not seen. So he left all that to come here to deal with our suffering. So what he's doing here does not measure to that which he had there. So he come here as a servant to serve humankind, and that's what he said. If you're going to follow him, the greatest among you should be servants, not who exalt themselves. And so he came down and thought it not robbery to make himself less than the angels, so that he may be able to help us out. So I don't the healing and all that, I don't think that inflated his ego, as we would say,
Right.
Because he was used to so much more.
Okay.
But does he have an ego?
No.
He has
No.
ego, like,
No, he don't have no, so he don't, no. And no, because even with that, when he came, he could have came on the throne. He could have came in the lineage of David and took the throne. But when he came, he allowed himself to be born in a trough, because that's what a manger is, that the animals eat out of. He was not on the inside when he was born. He attached himself to a family that lived in caves, that grew up in a place called Nazareth, that was so deep in the hood, they asked the question, can anything good come out of it? And so when we talk about Jesus, sometimes we don't get the real picture of where he came from. And where he came from, the Galilee part of the nation of Israel, were the poor people. That's why he was leading the poor people campaign. And they spoke broken Hebraic language. And that's why when Peter were coming to Jerusalem during the Passover time, the woman told Peter, you was with them because your speech betrayed you. You got your country self up here where all these proper speaking Jews are, and you got that broken Galilean, and we know you one of them Galileans, you ain't got no business up here. You was with him. And so he brought himself as low as he could to serve humanity, to be in the midst of the people who had been on the margins and marginalized and left out and messed over. And he put himself in that crowd so that he could show that God was a God of all people. God was not a God of the wealthy. God was a God of the oppressed, that God cared for everybody. So he dwelled among the least, even though he had the most. Okay? All right, read.
They make broad their phylacteries and enlarge the borders of their garment. And let them at peace. And the chief seats in the synagogue.
Okay. Now, synagogue to them would have been kind of like their church building. They put on these special garments and all this other stuff, and they want the best seats, they want the best food, they want the best seats in the synagogue. They want to sit up front and everything. And that's what these Pharisees did. And he said, this who they were. They presented themselves as if they was better than everyone else. God has no respecter of persons. Okay? No one is better than anyone else in the eyes of God. He sent Jesus into Nazareth so that he could show the Savior of the world come from the worst place that they had during that time. No one is better than anyone else. And now we in America, we have this pretense that everybody's equal, but is that true? So right now, since 1965 was the first year that we really had what's called a multiracial democracy, which means that all the people in America had a right to vote and participate in America's society fully.
That tells you right there, some people, they thought, they was thinking someone is better than others, right?
Yeah, the people of color were always treated as second-class citizens in America. The 1965 voting right supposedly gave us free access that functioned as completely in the American fabric and society. And now that right has been abolished. And that's what you hear them talking about now, trying to redo the Voters' Right Act. And they are making laws now, which makes it more difficult for people of color to get a chance to vote and participate fully in the American society. Because there are some people who believe that America is a white country. White European, and that white European should have privilege that other folk don't.
Read.
Yes, read.
And greetings in the markets, and to be called of men, Rabbi, Rabbi. But be not ye called Rabbi, for one is your master.
Okay, and they want, rabbi mean teacher. They wanted everybody else will call them teacher to lift them up. Go ahead.
Even Christ, and all ye are brethren.
Okay, so what he said, he said that as far as he's concerned, you don't call them rabbi, you call them brethren. He said because Christ is your teacher.
Exactly.
And the rest of them are your what?
Brother.
They're your brethren. Even in our day and time, in the church, we pastor and laity are equals. It's not one above the other. Different assignments, but we still equal. Okay, the pastor's not better than the people in the pew. And that's one of the things that the ministers is not better than the people in the pew. Different assignment, but the same people in the body of Christ. Yeah. And so, and as a matter of fact, it's supposed to be, they are supposed to be servants that have a larger duty to serve. Because Jesus said the greatest of them shall be what? Servants. And so we're supposed to serve. Now, if we're not careful, we will shift that thing like the Pharisees, and we will make ministers out to be people that they're untouchable. Yeah. And that's not how the kingdom is supposed to be.
But we have some that are, like even today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think they believe they're untouchable.
They believe they're untouchable.
Yeah.
Now, do you think the clergy did that, or do you think the people did it?
The people.
I think the people, at first it probably didn't start out like that, but then I think because the people said you have to act a certain way or do certain things, then it changed their mindset. Okay, well, I have to be this way.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then they kind of got used to it,
and then they don't talk with people. Now
the people that supposedly did this to them, now they're like, oh no, I
don't associate with
it. You know.
Yeah, and so that's not how it's supposed to be. When you see Jesus, who is the rabbi, who is the teacher, who is the Son of God, Jesus is walking, talking, sleeping, traveling in the same place with all these people.
Yeah, right.
Okay? Even to the point where Peter challenges him.
What?
Peter challenged him.
Peter's so, he seemed like he was a little different.
But that's how he was wired.
Yeah.
He was a little different. Peter was wired. Peter was wired for the purpose which he was served. He would eventually be the leader of the movement when Jesus left. And Peter was outspoken. Peter had what they call alpha personality.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, all the disciples had something.
No, all of them had something, but all of them wasn't alpha personality. All of them had something. You had Thomas that doubted everything. And so Thomas had to be a millennial. Thomas gonna ask a question about everything. And then he told Jesus, even when Jesus told him, I ain't gonna believe it. I need to feel, I need to touch the hole in your wrist. And he said, no. And so, and what does Jesus do? Jesus allow him to do what he asked. Now, and so that ought to teach us something about leadership too. You got different people, and because people ask questions, and because some folk got to be convinced, don't mean you condemn them. What Jesus did when Thomas doubted, he gave information to relieve Thomas of his doubt. Too often in our age, when people have questions, we want to shut them up and sit them down. So they're creating problems. Well, a real problem that you have in the church, if people don't understand, and now you send them off and they don't understand what they're supposed to be doing. It is best to take time to help people get understanding than it is to shoo them off to the side. Because if they get understanding, and that's one of the things that Proverbs tells them is above all, get what? Get understanding. If people get understanding, then they know how to operate.
Because that has a tendency to make a lot of people leave.
What?
When they don't, when you don't give them that time that they need to get that understanding and you push them off. So, well, you don't want to teach me, oh, I can go somewhere else. You know, get the learning that I need.
Yeah, but that come from some false pretenses, because we got some false pretenses that says certain leaders shouldn't be questioned. And that's where that comes in from. The idea, well, you shouldn't question leaders. You gotta question. You ask what? Ask the question. Now you may not like the answer you get, but at least you ask the question, and you get some clarity.
And I think even now, that's what's wrong with the churches. They don't like to question. It's kind of like, this is what it is.
Yeah,
Well,
Been doing it for the last couple of years.
this way.
well, because a lot of leaders are not comfortable with being leaders. They're not comfortable with themselves. You go ahead and ask the question. If we don't know it, we're going to find out. And no one person knows every answer. Some stuff we need to look up together. Okay? But pretense, and that's what the Pharisees were. They was these pretenders, dressed the part, looked the part, but they couldn't do the part. They were pretenders. Okay, pretending will get you in trouble, because ultimately we've been called to change the world, and we've been called to change the world by teaching the love of God and how to teach people how to be in the right relationship with God, and teach people how to be in the right relationship with each other. One of the most important portions of the church is to teach people how to be in the right relationship with each other, and create a climate where people can be in right relationships with each other. A climate where people are not condemned, but people are restored. Right? A climate where people are not oppressed, but people are liberated. That's the work of the church. And when we do a climate of, if I know something that can help you, I'm going to share it with you because I want to see you get ahead just like I do. That's supposed to be the idea of the church, because the church is not just about this spiritual thing that we shout about. The church is supposed to be helping, shaping people that they may live life and live it more what? Abundantly. Okay, so read.
And call no man your father upon the earth, for one is your Father, which is in heaven. Neither be called masters, for one is your master, even Christ. But he that is greatest among you all shall be your servant.
Okay, hold up, right there. He goes, he says, don't call him father. And some of them want him to call him father. And that position was a title of authority over them. Okay, don't call him master. Okay, he's not your master. You got one master, and that's who? The Lord. You got one Father, that's who? God. And so, and it's not talking about your biological father, don't call him. That's not what it said. It is saying to you, do not put these people in places where, because when the person becomes your father, it separates you from being at a level where you can be peers to work together. Now you're beneath that individual, because a father take care of what? Children.
And we're his church.
We're not children in the church. We are what? We're adults with assignments. That's why we say our Father's children. They ain't our children. The members of her chapel ain't my children. They ain't even my people. They belong to the Lord. And I've been assigned to help watch over them, help instruct them, to lead them, that they may have life, have it more abundantly, and be in right relationship with God and right relationship with each other. That's my assignment as pastor. Okay? So read.
And whosoever shall exalt himself shall be abased.
Okay, yes. And so, that means if you build yourself up, God will bring you down. That's what abase means. And so if you building yourself up, that's what the Pharisees were doing, building themselves up. I'm all this. The Pharisees you got to understand, the Pharisees would even get to the point where they would close their eyes and wouldn't look at certain people because they said they were such sinners they couldn't look up on people as sinners as them. And then when they would pray, I'm glad I'm not like these sinners over here and stuff. And they had exalted themselves, made themselves bigger and better than other folk. Okay. Be weary of anybody that is so spiritually high that they declare that there's no wrong in them.
Oh, yeah.
The Bible says that's a liar. All folk got faults. Different kind of faults, but they got what? Fault. Because we missed the mark, and that's what sin means, to miss the mark. Miss what we're striving for. How we're striving to be in a relationship with God. We miss that mark. That's what it means to sin. We miss the mark. And we sin by thought, word, and deed. All three of them. So in order to be faultless, that means your mind don't never think nothing wrong. You don't never say nothing wrong. And you don't ever do nothing wrong. Okay, so that's okay. So you get me? And so you don't think nothing wrong, you don't say nothing wrong, and you don't do nothing wrong.
Exactly, that's me all day long.
Oh Lord. And so sin is not just what you see people do. Sin take place in the mind. Sin take place through spoken words. And sin take place through what we actually do. So it happened in three different ways. It's sin regardless of which way it happens. And that's why I tell you, ain't no perfect folk. And if they tell you they're perfect, they're lying to you. And the Lord come back and said to us that we all sinners, and our righteousness is as filthy rags before Him. And so when God looked at us, He looked at us as the redeemed work that Christ has done, that's called imputed righteousness. That when God look at you, God see the work of Jesus in you, which qualify you to be in the presence of a holy God. Nothing that you can do of your own to qualify you to be present, but it is the work that Christ does in you to make you not guilty. Read.
And he that shall humble himself shall be exalted.
If you want to be lifted up, humble yourself. And there's the thing, if you humble yourself in the sight of the Lord, He will lift you up. Okay? And so, the humble is the way. Humble is the way. Because when you exalt when you're not humble, you try to exalt yourself, you have a tendency to step on people and use people and hurt people as your steps to get where you want to go. And remember, part of what we're supposed to be doing is helping people live life more abundantly, and loving neighbor as ourselves. And you cannot use people as stepping stones to get where you want to go. Because if we believe what we say, God is the author and the finisher of our faith, meaning that God is writing our story. And if we humble ourselves, He will exalt us. And if He will exalt us, there's no need for us to mistreat others to try to get where we need to go. And so he said, if you exalt yourself, build yourself up, you shall be what? A base. He's going to bring you down. But if you humble yourself, he will what? He will what? Exalt you. All right, read.
Of heaven against men.
Okay. He said, woe unto you, you hypocrites, ye scribes and who? Pharisees. Now the scribes and the Pharisees in that time by the people were considered the most righteous people in Israel. But Jesus said unto them, woe unto you, read it again.
It says, woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for ye shut up the kingdom of heaven against men.
Okay. He said, you shut up the kingdom. I'm coming to open the kingdom, present the kingdom, and you know what? You shutting it up.
Because of the actions, right?
Because of the actions. And that, remember when I first started reading, I think you might, it said, do what they say, but don't do what they do. Because their actions and their words in two different places. Their actions said love neighbor as yourself. I mean, the words said love your neighbor as yourself. Yeah. The actions is a totally different thing. And he said they're a bunch of hypocrites. And we see that playing out in our day and time. As the church become ruined by its association with the elites of our time.
Can you elaborate on that?
Okay. And I'm talking about the church overall that call itself the church. The church in America has tied itself to the Republican Party. Okay. And not just quite a few African American churches too. Not just white. They tied themselves to that movement. And that movement, the Republican Party, does nothing about loving neighbor as yourself. As a matter of fact, they continually put things into practice that oppress people who are struggling. Right? Y'all do know there's corporate welfare, right? Corporate welfare, you pay farmers not to grow crops. Do you know the oil industry gets subsidies from the government every year? I mean, they give them a whole lot of money. They get the oil industries more money than they get the people on welfare. Mm-hmm. But nobody say anything about that. Okay? And the church is complicit in it. Complicit in billionaires becoming billionaires. They're complicit in the fact that you have billionaires who may pay 5% taxes, while you got poor people who spending 30 to 35% of their whole income in taxes.
So that's how they're being oppressed. Hmm? So that's how they're being oppressed?
Yeah, because, put it this way, if we gotta live, and I can pay 6% of my money in taxes, and you got 35% of your money in taxes, and I'm already making more than you are, I'm gonna stay poor. Yeah. Because they giving me 19% of free resources that you're not getting. And they're going to take your taxes and pay for the roads and everything else that the wealthy using to get their goods and services to market.
Yeah.
And if the wealthy do something crazy and mess it up, they're going to bail them out like they did with the banks during the house with our money, and then they turned around, the banks turned around and took the people's houses
Yeah.
after they got bailed out.
That's a double whammy.
And nobody went to jail. Here it is. Poor people go to jail for tax evasions. Middle class people go to jail for tax evasions. Wealthy people don't go to jail for tax evasion. Okay? And that's what God called unjust systems. Okay? If you,
Well, that's just like when the rich people were paying their kids, well, not paying their kids, but paying people for their kids to get scholarships.
yes.
For free.
Well,
It's like you're rich. Why do you get a scholarship?
Yeah, they get scholarship. And they were paying for them to get in colleges that they couldn't rightfully get in
Yeah.
themselves. Well, you will hear people holler about affirmative action. So, well, black folk got into Harvard by affirmative action. But there's other types of affirmative action. If your family been to Harvard, you get so many points toward getting in because your family went there.
And that's mostly,
Okay, but that's a hypocrisy. See, because they'll tell you that the reason why you got into school is called affirmative action, which means they help you get there. You didn't get there on your own. But the truth of it is, you got people who family has been there and they get credit because their family been there. Ain't got nothing to do with they SAT, they scores, nothing. Their name is on bill. Ain't got nothing to do with any of that. Just because your family member went there, they give you extra credit to get in that school. And so these are the things that affects people and mess with their upward mobility that are unjust. And these are the same type of stuff the Pharisees were doing as they tried to limit the poor from moving ahead. But except in Jesus' case, the poor were so poor that they were just trying to survive. They didn't know where their meals was going to come from. In Jesus' time, a lot of those people, they were lucky if they ate meat once a month. Okay?
it's sad.
So we're talking about real poor people. That's why they were so sick and diseased, because of the conditions that they lived in. Read.
For ye need to go in yourselves, need to suffer ye them that are entering, go in. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees. I heard it, didn't it? Oh, it came back again. Hypocrites, for you devour widows' houses, and for the pretense make long prayer.
Okay, it said, you devour, you take the widow's houses, then you go into church and you make long prayers. Okay, you take from the poor. A lot of time, if the system that they had, if a widow didn't have a male child, a close relative, when her spouse died, she would lose her house, and they were taking the houses and stuff. And then you sit in the church and make all these long prayers. And so it just talks about, now remember, as people of God, one of the things that we're supposed to be doing, what? Loving neighbor as ourselves. So why would you want to take a widow's house and you know she has no other way to survive? But they did it because they became more property and money became more important than people. So let's ask that question now at a time. Is resources, money, property, vehicles, are those things more important than people?
They're not, but they act as if they are.
You sure? Are they? In America, are those things more important than people?
Yeah, I think so.
In a large part of society, it is. Why is it they don't want immigrants here? What's all this stuff about close the border? What's all that? Talk to me about that. And the church, a large portion of the church, fully backs that, anti-immigrant. Why don't we want poor from other countries coming here?
Because they work for less.
They're gonna come and take over.
Yeah.
Let a lot of them come here.
Take over how?
Huh?
Take over how?
Well, first, they're gonna, of course, get all the free incentives that we give out.
Do they really?
Put them up, and then.
So let's deal with that. Do they really? They only gonna get free incentives if the local people decide they want to give it to them because they hiring them for cheap.
Yeah.
No,
cheap
they
labor,
automatically
right?
get it.
No, they don't. They gotta apply for it,
You gotta
Well,
apply.
yeah, but man,
and they gotta apply for it, and they gotta show. They don't automatically get it.
And they're not immigrants, they don't automatically get it? So they still have to apply for it. So that they, whatever they're making it.
Well, most of the immigration that's in America, people didn't just come here. Companies brought them here, wanted them here to work for what?
Cheaper labor.
Cheap labor. And they paid them under the table.
So what did the rich benefit from that? I mean,
How do they benefit?
cheap labor, yeah, but,
they can build their businesses.
Yeah, they build their business costs, cheap labor. Because if I pay you under the table, I don't have to pay you minimum wages. Okay.
they'll pay you less than
So you're illegal, I can pay you anything I want to pay you.
what we agree on.
Well, you ain't got too much to agree on.
Exactly.
Because where you come from, people making $3 a day. Mexico, Guatemala, and those places, the people making $3, $4 a day if they got a job, some of them. So when you get here and you make $5, $6 an hour, that's under minimum wages, you grateful. And by the way, if you working for certain people, we gonna give you some fake IDs and stuff, and we're gonna get you some food stamps and all that other stuff. So we make sure you eat enough so you got enough strength to go do the work we want. But when the work dries up, then we gonna holler about you illegals.
But even with that, man, when they bring their kids over and they put them in schools, because I've seen them, put them in these schools, and of course they're getting food, because of course for that kid, the auntie or uncle might be already signed the kid up for food stamps on them because they're here legally. So now we're feeding the kids. So even if the parent does go back to the country, we're still here left feeding the kids or taking care of the kids.
But let's go back to the fact, now we looking at that approach. America spends more on corporate welfare than she does on human welfare. You know what corporate welfare is, right?
I'm not sure what corporate welfare is.
It's money they give businesses.
Oh, big businesses.
Yeah. You know, oil is big business, right? You know the government give oil companies money every year?
I didn't know that. I thought they just made money like
No. They get subsidies.
subsidies.
Okay?
Well, if you take a look at the stimulus check,
Yeah.
when they did them packages and stuff, a lot of the businesses got a lot of that money.
Yeah, they got a lot of money.
And we just got what was left.
They raised all kind of saying about you getting $1,000.
Yeah.
When businesses was getting millions of dollars. Okay? And that's the way, but they poison the mind of the people. Every time you look at shortages, look at the poor. They getting stuff for free, but they don't tell you what we giving to the wealthy. We pay farmers not to grow crops.
That's why we ain't got no food.
We pay them. And why do we pay farmers not to grow crops? So you can keep the prices high.
Yeah.
That milk is almost $3.
Say again?
I said that milk is almost $3 right now.
They want it up there. They want the milk up there. And just like prices going up now and people hollering, the reason why they going up because y'all gave them people minimum wages. Well, that's what they saying. Y'all increased the minimum wage So prices got to go up. Well, prices didn't have to go up. The only reason why prices go up because when you increase the minimum wages, the billionaires decided that we're going to take the prices up now because you can afford to pay a little bit more.
Yeah.
It's going to always come back on the poor people. And this is what was going on during their time. And so they felt they could never get ahead. Read.
What was that? I'm going to start back with 15.
Okay.
Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for ye compass seed and land to make one proselyte. And when he is made, ye make him twofold more than the child of hell than yourself.
Okay. He said, when y'all do make a convert, proselyte, you go out and get a convert. He's in worse shape than he was before you made him. Okay. And see, well, somebody said, well, why are we talking about all this stuff? Because the idea of Scripture is not supposed for you to read Scripture and look at it as stuff written on the paper. We're supposed to take it from the pages and talk about how it impacts our lives now. And that's why I'm comparing the world that we live in and the world that they was living in, and the principles. Jesus told us the principles that he commanded us. We're supposed to go out and teach those principles. Mm-hmm. And those principles about love, it's about caring for the least, it's about all those other things. Too often that's not taught in our society. Be humble, not to exalt yourself. All these things, that's what he's teaching. And so I'm saying, we talked about Jesus said, go ye therefore and teach all nations. And now I'm coming back and telling you this is what we ought to be teaching. And he's dealing with the scribes and the Pharisees. He's dealing with the ruling. They're a bunch of hypocrites. He said, they're corrupt. And these are the reason why they're corrupt. And now, do you have some of them that's good? Yes. But on the average, they are what? Corrupt. Read.
Woe unto you, ye blind guides, which say, whosoever shall swear by the temple, it is nothing. But whosoever shall swear by the whether is greater than the gold, or a temple that sanctified the gold. And whosoever shall swear by the altar, it is nothing. But whosoever swears by the gift that is upon it, he is guilty. Ye fools are blind, for whether is greater, the gift, or the altar that sanctified the gift?
Okay, so hold up there. Now that's the question. Now, which one is more important, the church or the money that's in the church?
Ooh. Good question.
Because that's what he's basically asking there. He said, y'all swear about the money and everything else, yeah. But the church, and go back, remember the church is what? The church are who? The people.
The people. So the people are more important.
The people who come, yeah. Because money is supposed to be a tool to help people live life abundantly. It is. Money is just supposed to be a tool.
But sometimes I think, as far as money goes, sometimes it's money that's, here's what we need, pay for this, pay for this, pay for this, if that makes sense. So it's kind of like, and then you'll see like, some of the preachers get up there, and of course they have kind of like their big giant mansions, but then they're asking the poor people for money. It's kind of like, where's the balance? If that makes sense. People want a private jet and stuff like that. So it's kind of like.
Well, that's what Jesus dealing with that here. It is out of balance. It's out of balance. When you got they got jets and all this other stuff, and it's out of balance. The idea is for everyone to have abundance, and not just some people, and their abundance to be out of balance. Okay, and too often you've got people who are who are just in it to get what they can get out of it. And that's what he called it, hypocrites, and that's what they were doing here. He would tell them, the goal has become more important than the purpose and ministry of the church. That's what he's saying. It has become more important than the altar, and the altar symbolizes the place where there's redemption. And so the goal of the altar become more important than the altar. And so it said that the resources in their time had become more important than everything else. And that was a problem. And it's still a problem. Today. Now, as long as they've been a church, all the way back from Abraham time, as long as they've been a people of God has required people to pay. But the idea of paying is to use that resources to help people have abundant life. Okay? And the idea of the church is supposed to be, they bring resources to the church go out, and it helps shapes the world, change the world so that people have more abundant life. It advocates on behalf of the poor. And just like we talk about church, we don't talk about enough about the stuff we do. I'm not talking about Hearst Chapel in particular. I'm talking about the AME Church, which there is not another religious body, African American predominant body in the world that has the scope, the ministry, the breadth that the African Methodist Episcopal Church does. But we never talk about what we do in so many different places. We fund most of all the work in Africa. Africans can't afford to do it. What we do here, fund all that. In Florida, we fund just about all the work that's in the Bahamas. They are a mission district. We fund a lot of the work that take place in Haiti, in Dominican Republic, and all those other places. We just sent another $1,000 this week, as the bishop called, to try to get enough money to send to the 13th district that got tore up with the tornadoes because they lost whole churches. That's what money is supposed to be used for. When your brother's in need, when there's hurt, when there's pain, that's the tool that money is designed to be used for, not to be hoarded. Because the Lord declared if you give it, in particular if you sow it in good seed, it'll come back to you. As some people say, money follows ministry. And if you're doing stuff with it, it will come back to you.
And I get that I feel like we throw money at stuff, but sometimes it's more than that, if that makes sense. Sometimes it's like for instance, I think a lot of times the churches have kind of backed off a little bit on justice.
Mm-hmm. They have.
One time, because I went to the the African Museum in Washington, and the AME Church, it was just like, oh, they were here with MLK. It was the forefront. You know, a lot of our churches.
The AME Church was
like
they was the locomotive. Right. King was the voice. The AME Church was the locomotive of the movement.
I'm like, well, where is our churches with? And justice is just one entity, but where is our churches at? It doesn't even have to be an AME church, but like Baptist.
Where are the black churches?
Where are the people to support? And I understand, we can throw money at it, but sometimes it takes the people to come.
Well, like we said, money is just a tool.
Right.
And a tool without the people can't get work done. You got to have the people working with the tool. And you're right. That's the very conversation that we're having right now in our church. It's talking about how do we recapture, because part of the problem is black folk thought they had made it. That's the real problem. And so as AMEs, we shifted from justice and self-help and building business and all that. And a lot of our pulpit shifted from that work and to what we call the prosperity ministry. And prosperity ministry is built upon individuals, just telling individuals how you get ahead. But if the system is corrupt, you can try all you want, and a lot of folks just ain't gonna make it. And so that's where we are now. And so we shifted from who we were doing this stuff that we did, and we shifted to this prosperity and this high church. And now we find out that we hadn't came as far as we thought we had. That this country, it is not as equal as we thought we had. That people, some of them that we consider our closest friend, were not who we thought they were. And people will tell you, well, I'm not racist, but racism is not a deal breaker for me. I'm not racist, but I'm not going to work against racism. Sure. And that's the problem. Because as King said, well, there's injustice anywhere, it's a threat to justice everywhere. And that's why God is so emphatic about doing justice. That's why Jesus is dealing with this, because when you let unjust people get in power, it starts breeding corruption. And that's where we are in our country now. The country is sorely divided right now, to the point where the country is almost ready to throw away its democracy and become authoritarian so that one group can lead. And believe me, we're close to it. If Trump hadn't got reelected again, American democracy would have been dead. Yeah, it would have been dead. And he ain't far from running and getting elected again. And if American democracy dies, then the people who suffer the most are the people on the margins, people of color, the poor, and others. That's who's gonna suffer. Because now you don't have a voice. A lot of times people were doing stuff to help you because they want to stay in office, and they know you had a vote. But when you become authoritative, your vote don't even matter no more. And that's what they tried to do this last election cycle, and that's what they do with the laws they passing. If we don't like who you voted for, we just change it. And they made some laws like that. We change it and put it who the people in power want to be. All those things are taking place right now in our country. And the church is silent. Okay? Part of it is supporting the movement. Okay. All right, we at our time. The Lord be with you. And we'll pick back up next time in Matthew 23 as Jesus continued to deal with the more important things of the kingdom. Because some things are more important than others, and we're going to find that out. All right.